So welcome everybody. We're in the 10th webinar. It's already the 10th webinar. We're, as coordinators of a project, CE Youth for Europe, very, very surprised that the time has already passed and we're arrived at the 10th webinar. I'm very happy to see Teresa, who's our coordinator of this project, the main person and like the very strong backbone of us. And this project is mostly dedicated to connecting and engaging and empowering youth workers and youth in the Europe, connecting us and fostering a very strong connection between young Europeans and decision makers. And today we're meeting here under the European Youth Goal number 10. It's called A Sustainable Green Europe. It's about achieving society in which all young people are environmentally active, well-informed and educated, and are able to make a true difference in decisions that are calculated, that are aware about environmental topics and about sustainability and how to make their daily habits and life about interested in nature and aware of environmental factors. And with us today, we have Darius Verseckas. Welcome, Darius. Very nice to see you again. And he's an experienced marketing and communications expert with, I would say, probably more than a decade in digital marketing, media, and communications, and is currently a chief marketing officer and co-founder of InSoil, which is a climate-focused fintech company. So Darius, welcome here. Today we'll have his presentation, and after that, we will be open to have some Q&A session. So if you have a question throughout the webinar, please keep it until the end. And after the presentation of Darius and after his speech, you will be able to ask it with your voice or drop it in a chat. So welcome, Darius, once again, and present yourself a little bit, and let's start.
Thanks, Giedra. Hi, all. Happy to be here and happy to see so many people participating in the webinar. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you about climate change, a very important topic that is becoming more and more important every single day, as we're still on the path to minimize our carbon footprint as a humanity. I will just share the slides quickly, and actually I would like you to actively participate, and if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, just drop them. You can write them in the chat, you can just raise a hand. I think that if we will all discuss it, it will be much more interactive and easier, right? Okay. Now you should be able to see my screen. So I'm representing InSoil, a company that together with two friends, we co-founded back in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. And we understood that one of the key areas in solving climate crisis is agriculture. My presentation will have pretty much three parts. One is I would like us to equalize the knowledge a little bit on the climate change and talk from my perspective what is important and what are the facts that we should look at. We will also talk a little bit about what can we do as individuals, as society, as businesses, and then I will talk briefly about what my company does and how we contribute to climate change mitigation. So let's begin with understanding a little bit. Are you actually anxious about climate change? Do you worry about it? Maybe anybody would like to write it in the comment section or just raise a hand. How often do you think about climate change lately? Don't be shy.
I see in the chat that daily high and daily, of course, people are pretty concerned, I would say. High, medium.
All
Okay.
right.
Also medium and daily. So we're all pretty much, I would say, aware and have this concern that is also common.
Okay, I hope you all can sleep at night. I'm happy that you're worried. We will talk a little bit about the solutions and how we can actually convert those worries into actionable points and what can we do about climate change, all right? Good. I often hear all the complicated descriptions and explanations what is climate change. But in the nutshell, it's such a simple thing. We have lots of greenhouse gases that are being just trapped in the atmosphere. And when the sun comes, it heats up the planet more. There's nothing more to it. It's just several gases that we, as a society, been producing for hundreds of years. And I saw this graph that basically shows how our wonderful progress in maturing, in creating a lot of good inventions affected us in a way of our temperature has been rising quite a bit. And even though we don't see it from year to year, we all have memories from our childhoods, how the weather was milder. And what is interesting that people who are in their early 20s now, they actually already experienced 5 heat records just in 20 years, heat records from the day we started measuring. So it means pretty much 200 years. And again, I understand that CO2 emissions are kind of bad, but we did so many great things with them. We created a lot of infrastructure, traveling got easier, Internet of Things. Now we have AI, we build a lot of electrical appliances. We made our lives so much better. And now with stuff that we created, we actually need to revert a little bit and think, okay, we increased carbon dioxide by 50% in the last 200 years. What can we do in the following 50? And that is a thought experiment that we as a society have been doing for quite some time. And we have some interesting explorations there. But let's look into the sectors. What sector and what activity do you think is polluting the most? If you can write in comments or raise a hand, that would be lovely. So which
Perhaps the
sectors
fashion
has the highest
industry.
pollution? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, perhaps the fashion industry is one of them.
Fashion. I see industry in general. I see agriculture, oil. What else?
Single-use plastics.
All right. Let's look into the graph. So I took a little bit more generalized industries for us to just see the areas that are the most polluting and how they look like. So pretty much the biggest one is the electricity. How do we generate energy to sustain our infrastructure that we're creating and we already have? We're still using lots of coal, lots of fossil fuels that are harming our atmosphere. Nearly the same cost for the planet is the food. how we produce the food, how we consume the food, how we transport the food. It includes everything from growing the food to actually getting it on our tables. So these two combined have more than half of the impact to climate change. And then we have all the remaining ones like manufacturing, transportation, where we have a lot of initiatives in building. You might have heard that likely the world will need to get rid of concrete in 100 years. And scientists are actively looking how we can find a substitute. What is interesting that 10 countries generated 60% of all the greenhouse emissions. That's on the annual basis. Any guesses? What are the countries?
Okay,
Yeah,
so you say
China,
China and
India.
India.
Yep. Well, basically, if you take countries by size, that's pretty much where will you get. There's Brazil, probably not the most obvious one. There's also United Arab Emirates, just because of the oil extraction. But the largest economies create the most pollution, and creating pollution is what helped us to get where we are. So we see US, we see lots of European countries, the most developed economies who actually polluted for past couple hundred years. The debate happens in the world that, well, okay, you guys actually had those 200 years to pollute a lot and you had massively successful development. Now other countries have massively successful development. Why should they reduce their emissions? And you can hear that from India, you can hear that from Vietnam, not much from China anymore. But if we see a rapid development across all the countries and they still need to burn fossil fuels, it means that our vision of actually reducing CO2 emissions on the global scale is doomed. Therefore, everybody is looking for interesting solutions, how we can actually replace our traditional ways of creating things. And I think a very important document is all often forgotten is national determined contributions. I suppose you all heard about Paris Agreement. It had a tiny part where there was written all the national contributions, how countries are determining what they will do and how much emissions will they actually manage to remove. Every COP we're checking the progress, and this is the latest. It's from last year. Basically, what you can see here by color is how countries managed to achieve what they agreed to achieve. And here we see that Europe is leading the road in the world. I'm very happy to see that. I'm actually very interested, what are the countries you from? And how are your countries doing in this map? Can you also write down or tell about it?
Spain, Belgium, Croatia,
Right.
Romania, Latvia. Who else is with us? Poland,
Poland.
of course, Lithuania. And okay, I saw the ones in the chat that's already been mentioned.
Yeah, so we are the countries where concern is much higher than the rest of the world. You can see that we actually, one thing, we contributed quite a lot. We said we will do a lot. And as a European Union, we actually managed to implement a lot of legislation, a lot of interesting ideas. how we become more climate friendly. And you can see that all Spain, Croatia, Latvia, all the countries that you're from been doing quite well. And I suppose you're having very different types of conversations about climate change compared to many countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, because the awareness is here. Europe is the continent of taking care of the climate. Now, we were not 100 years ago, but now we're leading the way. I'm very happy about it, but we can still do more. And we can show the whole world what should be the pace on acting on climate change. And what if we actually just don't do anything? Because I hear that from the US quite a bit. Donald Trump says he invented clean coal. Lots of countries are just saying, come on, we still have a lot of starvation in the country. It's not our first priority. And for very little number of countries, climate change seems like the highest priority. We always try to solve it through United Nations, but we don't talk a lot in internal politics about climate change. At least, I don't know, in my country, I wouldn't say that climate change was ever the first topic, for example, during the elections. It is one of the topics, but taxes, economy will be always the first one, I suppose. So what happens if we actually just decide not to do much from now on? You probably already saw quite a bit of wildfires and forest loss, especially those guys who are from Spain, Portugal. It happens quite a bit during the summer. Sea level rise. I know that there are at least 2 cities in the world that already started building walls to prevent themselves from sea level rise. We would lose a lot of species, both in the water, underground, lots of birds. They would just not be able to sustain their living in an extreme conditions. And we would have lots of droughts and storms, which would actually mean that growing food would become more and more complicated. And we already see that even those regional things like war in Ukraine can actually affect the whole world on levels of hunger. So because of the war in Ukraine, wheat exports decreased to Africa, and we actually got a very direct effect of starvation. So all the climate change related drastic events would lead to even worse consequences. And we already see that climate-related migration does not sound like such an unrealistic scenario compared to what it looked like 20 years ago. So if we combine all these factors, the world in 50 years, if we're doing pretty much nothing, would change dramatically. Some areas would become unlivable. Some areas would become very, very dense. And food production would become pretty complicated. And even now, we see that 3 billion people, which is 1/3 of the world's population, are already living in the places that are heavily affected by climate change. So I know that for me personally, climate change did not have a lot of effect. I'm from Lithuania. It got warmer. It's usually a very cold country. We have some much warmer weather. Having in mind that I live in the city, it doesn't bother me that much. It doesn't affect my personal life that much. It affected some farmers, but I suppose especially for people in the city, people in the Central Europe, Northern Europe, they didn't feel that dramatic change. But if we take people who are more vulnerable to climate change, who are in the areas that are more affected already, they are disproportionately affected. That becomes a pretty massive problem. And one thing that actually concerns me quite a lot, and I suppose that we, for some reason, stopped talking that much, is Amazon jungle. I'm always blown by the vastness of it and by how much Europe, Asia, US should think about the Amazon. So we're cutting the largest forest in the world, which actually can change the whole ecosystem of the world. It can change the waves, it can change the wind, it can change humidity, and we have a massive deforestation. And then when I think about it, if we bring more climate change related topics to our local governmental agendas, we can actually through that push the reforestation of Amazon. And I think that's one of the climate actions that we can actually take, which Amazon jungle sounds, at least to me, it sounds very far, crazy far. So far that I don't have influence over. But when our representatives comes to United Nations, then you can actually have some impact. So I talked about one solution, what can we do? But what can we actually do in our daily lives to become more pleasant to the environment, to become more pleasant to our planet? Maybe some of you already have some answers, and as so many of you actually said in the very beginning that your awareness of climate change and your worry of climate change is very high. Maybe you can write or tell what are the habits that you actually incorporated in your own lives already to be friendlier to the environment. Anybody?
Maybe everybody is still typing, but for example, me, I use plastic way less. I just use the same water bottle every day, all the time, for like a past year. So that's like a very, very small thing I contributed, not buying water when I'm away, just taking the one I have and using it again and again and again.
Lovely. Yeah. Lots of these solutions, even though they look so small, actually, if we do them on scale, they bring a lot of value. How many of you have a car? Oh, I see.
It's still
Several even answers. Okay. So, eat as much organic food, sustainable clothing, recycling. Lovely. Reducing overconsumption of clothing. All right. I'm going towards zero waste lifetime. Rosalia, wow, that's very impressive. Working with local sustainability groups. Awesome. Yeah, I suppose not many people who joined the call are just shopping in Shein and buying all kinds of very wasteful, very cheap things. Lovely. So, how many of you have a car? Not that, no car owners, really, out of 80 people. At least, oh yeah, we have. How many have an electric car? How many already made the shift and are super happy about it? Do we have any? Yeah, I see at least the response. I don't, but I would love to have one in the future. There's an interesting thing about electric cars. I know that you can see a lot of news how that will save the transportation sector, which is fourth by CO2 emissions. What is interesting is how CO2 emissions are being split into pretty much two time zones. One is producing an electric car. Even though there's less parts, it actually is a bit faster to manufacture. It creates 50 to 80% more CO2 emissions than a typical combustion engine car. So if you're buying an electric car, effectively at that point, you're increasing CO2 emissions in the world. So the worst case scenario is you buy a new electric car and then you bump into the wall and it's irreparable. It means you created a lot of emissions and they just stay there. Why electric car is more efficient is because of the long run. If we take that on average car spends 20 years in use, that's when we actually have those emission reductions. So we, in the beginning, create quite a lot of emissions. And now, as we're switching globally so much to electric cars, it means that pretty much we're borrowing CO2 emissions from the future when we will have significant reductions. So currently, car manufacturing is more polluting than it used to be before the electric car, which is very interesting. But in the long run, it will actually reduce significantly CO2 emissions in the whole sector of transportation. So if you do have an electric car, drive it even safer. Another area that I'm very excited about is fusion energy. Have anybody heard about it before? Because it had some interesting breakthroughs recently. First time, others? Oh, I see that we're still in the electric car topic. Fusion energy is at least what I'm quite passionate about. It's an idea of pretty much 70 years that we can do, let's say, the opposite process of nuclear power plants, which would be safer, but would still generate energy. Fusion energy is how sun is generating so much power, or any star is generating so much power. Scientists globally have been working on it for, pretty much 70 years. And I think all those 70 years, we felt like we're a decade away from the breakthrough. If you saw that energy is the number one source of pollution, some scientists are saying that if we will actually manage to get to fusion energy and build fusion energy reactors, which would be much safer than the regular ones, nuclear power plants of fission energy, actually electricity issue might be saved. But getting closer to my area of expertise and where I spend every day, how many of you are vegetarians? Oh, two vegans. One vegetarian already. Two. So out of 80 people, okay, now we have 5 in total. Do we have anybody else? 6. 7. All right, we have 7 people for sure. Maybe somebody did not want to disclose their eating habits. That's actually the highest proportion you would usually meet. Meaning 7 people out of 80 is still a very, very significant number. Even though 1.5 billion people worldwide does not eat meat. That pretty much makes what? 1 person in 7, right? So that is kind of close to our group. However, the truth is a little bit different around this topic. And that's why climate change is so hard. We are very aware, we are very concerned about climate change. We spoke about it in the very beginning. We actually worry about the future and how our climate look like. But switching from eating meat is a hard decision. And then we think like, I do care about it, but do I want to take an action? In most cases, it's not. I know quite many people who decided to just limit their meat consumption. I know that in many European diets, meat is just inevitable. And so lots of people, when they calculate how many meals that consist meat they eat on the weekly basis, they end up with like 12, 10. So just lowering it to 7, it's already a progress, or 5. So I'm not saying that everybody has to become vegetarians and eating meat means that you don't care about the climate and the environment. But I think we can just, if everybody slowly reduces, we don't even have to become all vegetarians. We can eat meat, just do it more regularly. But what is interesting is that out of those 1.5 billion people who are not eating meat, they either do not eat it due to religion or because they do not have access to it. And I see that there are some vegans and vegetarians, and you most likely have quite a lot of soy in your diet. And I think all the soy meals are amazing, but actually soy that is being used for human consumption is less than 1% of all the soy that we grow. So almost all of it actually goes to chicken, pork, and all other animals that people eventually consume as meat. So when you think about it, just switching a little bit, we can produce so much soy that we would end world hunger. If we would agree that, okay, let's consume significantly less meat and significantly more soy, that would mean that we would need to grow the same amount of soy, just less meat. That's it. That's the solution. And if cattle would be ranked as a separate country, it would be a third country by CO2 pollutions. So China, US, and then cattle. It's not even India. India has 1.1 billion people, and all those people combined create less CO2 equivalent gases than all the cattle in the world. And important to point out is that cattle produce methane, not carbon dioxide, and methane is 20 times more poisonous to the environment than carbon dioxide. So that actually creates a very, very significant result. I see Teresa is saying that you agree to soy to increase protein intake, but as not the only way of protein, definitely. There are many interesting alternatives how you can actually intake protein. I think soy is just one of them, and it's the one that is so easy to scale. It's incredible. So what else can we do? We spoke about meat consumption. We haven't spoken about seasonal products, but that sounds like an easy one. Responsibly made products, and many of you mentioned clothing. At least what I can say is I'm proud to be Lithuanian because we have our first unicorn is Vinted, the secondhand clothes marketplace. So I think they brought the awareness so much on you don't need to buy new clothes, and you can buy something pre-loved and it will actually work as good. So all these innovations actually really help. Public transport, I saw that many of you are actually switched already to public transport instead of driving. I know that often in the projects of Erasmus Plus, there's somebody who's refusing to fly and they're going with the train. That's a much more sustainable alternative. Limiting energy consumption, recycling. I know that it highly depends on municipality that you're in, what is the recycling policy there, but at least I see that there's quite a lot of action happening, and not only in Europe. Honestly, the most sophisticated recycling system I've ever seen, it was in China, in Shanghai. They launched it like 3 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. So recycling actually took off, and I think even if your local municipality is not so big on it, on the global scale, we're reaching pretty significant numbers. Oh, carpooling, lovely. Yes, that is one of the beautiful initiatives. Alina, are you from France by any chance? No, Romania. Okay, I was instantly thinking of BlaBlaCar and how they brought carpooling to so many other people. And yeah, the last one, which is the easiest and at the same time might feel like the hardest, stop taking long showers. You don't need to spend half an hour in the shower to be clean. Very, very simple. But as I said in the slide before, fighting climate change is hard. It's unpleasant on the personal level. Why would I do that? And what will change if I will stop doing things that I'm used to on the daily basis? But actually, if we all chip in, we do quite a lot of significant action. On the business level, we have a voluntary carbon market that helps companies who want to contribute to climate actually do that. Have anybody heard about voluntary carbon market? All right, lovely. No, haven't. So we pretty much have two markets. One is compulsory, where companies that are the biggest on CO2 pollutions, they must offset their CO2 emissions. Let's take coal power plants. Let's take some factories that are heavy on pollution, all the heavy industries. They actually have to buy CO2 permissions every single year to offset their CO2 emissions. So it's a regulation, it's been for years, it's pretty clear. The voluntary carbon market helps companies to offset their emissions because they want to, or because they see some kind of incentive in it. Because basically, if you take companies like Google, Microsoft, I don't know, Netflix, they don't create that much CO2 emissions that we would say, okay, we have to put the regulation on you guys. You have to offset your emissions. But they can also chip in voluntarily. How does it work? So I put it on the human level because actually you can also offset your CO2 emissions on the personal level. And first of all, you need to calculate them. So you take a flight to Spain. Well, let's say in my case, I'm flying to Spain from Lithuania, and I will create 2 tons of CO2 emission equivalent. What I can do afterwards, and you probably saw it even with some airlines who are advertising that you can offset your flight, you're buying 2 carbon credits on the voluntary carbon market. And those 2 carbon credits represent 2 tons of carbon that was either removed from the atmosphere or due to some innovation was not extracted into the atmosphere. So, for example, for your 20 euro, somebody planted trees in Kenya. And those trees will be absorbing CO2 emissions, and they either already absorbed those 2 tons of carbon, or they will absorb because of your 20 euro. And that makes your flight carbon neutral. So if we bring it on the level of, I don't know, Microsoft, they calculate their unavoidable CO2 emissions, meaning they cannot consume less electricity. They're a tech company. They need to go to work. They need to have the lights on. All of that, all the servers, everything, computers running, they need new computers. They calculate how much CO2 emissions on the annual basis they create, and they actually even publish a report. How much CO2 emissions Microsoft created in, let's say, 2024. And then they announce a public tender of, okay, we want to offset our 2 million tons of CO2 emissions that we created last year. We don't have to, but we want to, and that will support the local communities that are actually fighting the climate change with their good actions, with what they're doing. And what are those good actions? Where your or company's money go when you decide to offset yourself and be carbon neutral. I remember that in the chat, somebody mentioned that they are trying to become carbon neutral. I suppose that was not much through voluntary carbon markets, but through behavior, which is actually even much more valuable. That's a very, very serious thing to do. I suppose that shows pretty much the highest awareness that can be and the highest commitment. But if you want to offset your CO2 emissions that you create by just paying money and not doing a good deed, so those carbon credits that you buy, the money of them go to planting trees, which is, I think, pretty easy. It's nothing too complicated, can be adopted anywhere in a very, very simple manner. renewable energy. So actually one of the largest companies that generated carbon credits is Tesla. Due to their innovation, the world reduced quite a lot of CO2 emissions, and Tesla generated carbon credits. That doesn't sound like buying carbon credits to actually help local societies, but that also made a significant impact. Agriculture, better farming creates healthier soil and absorbs CO2 emissions. Then there are all kinds of innovations of capturing carbon through technology. So there's industrial that I mentioned here, but I didn't see anybody from Switzerland, but there's an awesome Swiss company that just created a machine that sucks in the air and takes CO2 from it. So all these technological improvements also generate carbon credits, and by offsetting whatever you do or your company does, you actually contribute to all these projects that are creating our world cleaner. This market is still pretty small, so it's a little bit over $2 billion today, which is, as for a global market, is not much. But voluntary carbon market is expected to grow to at least 50 billion by 2030. And this is pretty much a global solution how everybody can chip into the climate change. Because I know that lots of people will not take action in doing those things themselves. For example, going and planting trees. They just won't do it, and it's okay. We can't be that nearly 10 billion people will just go outside and start planting trees. It needs to be organized. It needs to be done in a proper way. In some areas, it might not be viable. It has to be an organized and smart action. But this market is actually one of the boldest solutions how we can tackle climate change. And Microsoft, that I mentioned before, is actually the largest buyer. So they decided that they will be carbon neutral company, and they've been helping this market to mature quite a lot. Actually, including my company also participates in public tenders to sell carbon credits to Microsoft. And all the companies that are taking one of the actions that I listed in this slide can actually apply for Microsoft, and they will select some projects that they want to fund and they want to expand on as a good deed for society and as a thank you for allowing that company to create so many emissions before. So soil, that's where I exactly focus. And soil might be the most significant solution to climate change that we currently have. There's pretty much two that can help us to remove existing CO2 emissions. One is soil, another is sea and oceans. So the solution to climate change that we've been talking about for so long actually is literally under our feet. And what we understood when we launched InSoil in 2020, that farmers want to grow food more sustainably, but for that they need a little bit more of upfront investment. Just like we spoke about electric cars, actually electric car for some requires quite a bit of upfront investment. Also, it creates quite a bit of upfront CO2 emissions. So with farming as well, you can transition to growing healthier food with less impact on environment, but you need to make a commitment, you need to have additional knowledge, and you need some finance on it. Oh yeah, I see the question. What do the colors mean? Right. So these are the darker countries are the ones where we are already operating. So in 5 years, we expanded from Lithuania to Latvia, Poland, Bulgaria, Portugal, and our latest addition was Ukraine. And Ukraine has an incredible potential to solve climate change with the very rich and unique soils. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the problem of how come agriculture holds the key of climate change. We understood that there are several problems that prevent farmers from growing healthier food at a lower impact to the environment. Old equipment that they cannot renew, over-fertilization, because lots of agronomists are being sent from fertilizer companies like, well, I'll not tell the names, but you all know a lot of them, and soil management practices. Basically, what the world understood in 50s is that plowing the soil is harmful. Because what happens, all the plants are absorbing CO2 emissions and then pushing them to the ground. When we're plowing the ground, we're pretty much flipping that soil and flipping organic carbon, and it oxidizes with the air, and it goes as CO2 emissions back again. I had somewhere a map where it clearly shows how on the global scale, early spring is the time when the world has the highest pollution levels. And it's not because of heavy industries or something. It's because so many farmers are using the plows and CO2 emissions are just getting extracted. And then we see that around May, June, July, these are the cleanest months when all the plants are absorbing CO2 emissions. And when we have so much arable land on the planet, it actually controls our whole environment. We see very significant changes just by seeing the cycle of agriculture and the cycle of CO2 emissions. They're pretty much aligned. And to shift to more sustainable agriculture in Europe, because we're basically focused on European Union to agricultural sectors to become carbon neutral. European Commission identified that we need 62 billion euro in financing, meaning in loans for farmers. Vast majority of this amount actually is among small and medium farms who struggle to access capital from traditional financial institutions, meaning banks, cooperative banks, all these types of financial companies. I see Alina is writing, Romania is waiting for us. Actually, Romania has one of the highest number of small and medium farmers. The problem is pretty deep there. Romania is one of the countries where access to financing to shift to more sustainable agriculture is the most complicated one. The easiest access to finance is in Netherlands, but Romania is quite problematic. Actually, Lithuania is quite problematic. Poland, Spain has lots of problems. The problem from farmers' perspective to switch to sustainable agriculture, it's sometimes for me, it feels even a little bit weird, but lots of them do not even apply for a loan to shift to more sustainable way of doing business due to fear of rejection. They already been said no so many times that they're not even applying. They're saying, okay, I'll just do things the way I've been doing because there's nobody to provide me actually any financial assistance. to make some very good decisions. So 37% of all the applications are being rejected every year. And actually, sometimes, some years it's much higher. It depends on the economic cycle a little bit. And then back in 2020, we created 3 products. So one is helping farmers to transition to a little bit more sustainable agriculture, or just expand their operations with regular interest rate, just like a banking loan. And also we created a carbon farming program, which provides them guidance. We have a network of agronomists who are helping every farmer to switch to more regenerative agriculture, which basically means get rid of the plow, go into minimum soil disturbance agriculture. There's things like direct seeder, strip till, no tillage farming. You can Google how those machines look like, but basically what it means that you're getting rid of the plow and getting a machine that has pretty much hundreds of knives, and those knives are just cutting into the grass and putting the seed in. That's the whole innovation. And this innovation holds the key to climate change. So we're helping farmers to reduce chemical fertilizer, to go to these minimum tillage farming practices, to put cover crops, to rotate crops, to improve their soils in any ways possible. So those soils can naturally absorb CO2 emissions from the environment and hide them in the soil. And if we're not plowing that soil, it just stays there for hundreds of years. And our latest addition was a product called green loans. I told you about the voluntary carbon market, where companies like Microsoft come to offset their emissions, and they are paying a price for each ton of carbon removed or reduced from the atmosphere. So we created an innovation here where we are providing 0% capital to the farmer. So they're getting loan for free. If the farmer is borrowing 100,000 euro, he will repay 100,000 euro, nothing extra. But those part of those carbon credits that they will generate will go to the company that actually funded them. So we are acting as a platform. Let's say Microsoft wants to invest in generating those carbon credits. They will fund the loan for a farmer. Farmer will manage to switch the practices, and they will get those carbon credits to offset their CO2 emissions. We already managed to fund more than 20 million of these green loans, and more than 70 million of regular loans for small and medium farmers, helping them to switch. Oh yeah, so here's all the numbers. In total, we already managed to deploy 84 million euro in capital for more than 3,500 farmers. And we also conducted more than 10,000 soil samples to measure carbon impact, because the difficult part of making a positive change to the environment is that nobody believes you until it's verified. Because if we don't have some kind of verification body that tells that this is true, then it's wild, wild west. We can just do whatever. So the whole market of voluntary carbon credits works that you go through, in our case, already 3 years of verification process where various auditors are coming and checking your calculations, talking to the farmers that you actually included in your program, and understanding how did you come up with those numbers? Did those numbers are backed by science? So therefore, in our case, even though it looks like, well, we are giving loans to farmers, that sounds like heavily financial business. But what actually happens every 2 years in every country is we are bringing quite sophisticated soil sampling equipment and driving around those countries with those specialized vehicles and taking tubes of soil. We just pretty much just dig 60 centimeters in the soil, take the sample, bring it to the lab. And we've been doing that for past 3 years. We collected more than 10,000 samples. What is interesting, now we hold more knowledge about European soil than Europe, pretty much. Well, nearly as much, actually. Soon will be more. Next year, I think we will reach that level. Which is, I still can't understand how private initiative can have more samples and more knowledge about one of the key components of fighting climate change. But well, somehow that happens. I suppose that's the beauty of somebody finding a business in climate change. Because we are not nonprofit. We are a for-profit organization. We are taking administrative fees. And we see that the better we do to the environment, the better the business is. I really want many more businesses to be this way, to find these innovative business models that actually base their success on climate action. I spoke a little bit of soil sampling, but actually there's so much more than that. Really, the process of proving that you removed or reduced CO2 emissions requires a pretty large team of scientists. So what we have, besides taking the soil samples in the very same spot every 2 years and bringing them to the laboratory to measure how much organic carbon we have at which point in time, we also have lots of questionnaires. Through satellites, we're always monitoring how the field looks like. So pretty much I could tell when vast majority of our farmers harvested all their crops. We can see it from satellite imagery. Then we take all the regional data. We take even weather forecasts. And by that, we have a sophisticated model to understand how quickly CO2 emissions are being removed from the atmosphere into which field by the soil type. So it's a pretty sophisticated science, but why I'm very excited about soil and agriculture as one of the potentially most significant solutions to climate change is that every single year for past several years, we've been emitting around 50 billion tons of CO2 emissions globally. It's been stable for 3-4 years, especially COVID actually stopped things quite significantly. So we kind of shifted from that aggressive growth in CO2 emissions. It's slowing down, not as much as I want to. It's still massive. What is interesting is if we would start growing food sustainably for ourselves, we either remove half of all the CO2 emissions that we emit on the annual basis. So let's say, again, every year we're creating 50 billion tons of CO2 emissions. All the agricultural land on the conservative scenario could absorb half of it, if all the farmers are switching to more sustainable ways of doing it. There are some researchers saying that some special soils and different types of modeling are showing that all the agricultural land combined could remove all the CO2 emissions that us as a humanity create and take a little bit more from our past. Therefore, I think that pushing farmers to shift to more sustainable practices is such a meaningful mission. And I know that in every country that you're from, you had farmer protests a year ago, I suppose. And those farmer protests were exactly the conversation about sustainability. I've been to one as well. I spent quite a lot of time talking to the farmers. And even though it looks like, come on, if agriculture can solve a global problem of we have too much CO2 emissions and climate is becoming worse and worse, why don't we do that? But the answer is same as with not eating meat. If you're used to it, it's pretty hard to give up. So for farmers, if you're used to what you've been doing and it requires additional inputs, additional investments, changes in mindset, you support it, but you're not doing it. So I hope that with financial support that we're giving them, we will actually manage that. So now we have 5 countries. I hope that in 5 years we will have a whole European Union. So yeah, that's it. I'm very happy to answer to all your questions. I hope that information was useful, both on a very general level of just equalizing our knowledge about things. And I hope that our story of InSoil also inspired somebody to look for innovative businesses that would find their success in removing CO2 emissions from the atmosphere.
Thank you, Darius, so much. That was a very different perspective than we are used to, but at the same time, very inspiring, offering a solution that maybe a lot of us would overlook and not even come to think about solving climate change and climate related issues from that perspective. So for me, it's very interesting to hear you every time. And right now, I welcome everyone to ask questions because we're still here for more around 20 minutes. So you can drop the questions in the chat or ask them directly by just turning on your microphone. And as well as Laura just posted an evaluation form that is also in the chat and very important for us to actually have feedback from you given to us to acknowledge how we can improve webinars just in general. And for the rest of you, you're welcome to ask questions. Darius, I leave the floor to you.
I'm the person who said that I was vegan. Oh, I think someone else is trying to speak as well. I'm gonna let you then.
It's okay, Rosalia. Maybe you can ask the questions. I see that Teresa also popped her hand. I can moderate that. So go on,
Okay,
please.
so I'll start then. I don't know if it's related to what we were speaking about, but I wanted to ask, I guess, a question for the public. I've encountered it many times. So when you're trying to go for a vegetarian or vegan diet, many people are concerned whether it's healthy for you. And I don't have like a short answer to that. Maybe you can expand upon it.
Oh, that is an interesting one. Honestly, I'm not a vegetarian, so for me, it's a little bit hard to answer. I suppose, actually, there's so many alternatives to getting protein, and we all choose which ones to use. But I saw that there are some more vegetarians and vegans. Maybe you can actually chip in with your thoughts.
I'm very happy to mention to step in. I've been vegan since I was I'm 36 now. So I've been vegan since I was 21, and before that I was 5 years vegetarian. And my advice, if you really want to transition, because in a sense, it's, it's transitioning from one lifestyle to another. And, it's someone was mentioning that it's socially difficult. Yes, I'm from Spain. I'm in the airport at the moment and there is no place for me to eat at the moment. Anyways, and my flight is delayed. My advice, check with a nutritionist because you really need to know, your body composition, the specific intake of protein you need, but it's not only protein. There are so many elements that you really need to balance. So what I did, first thing I did indeed was just, getting an appointment with a nutritionist that also have the empathy, because some nutritionists, they will tell you, no way at all. But I went to a specific one that was very, sensitive, and he was also vegetarian at that time. Carmen, I'm going to mute you, by the way, or I'm not, Guidre, I'm not co-host anymore. Yeah. So my advice for you is you really need to find a professional. Otherwise, sometimes people start trying things and it has a physiological effect. So definitely, this is what worked for me, but maybe for some people didn't. So yeah, that's my advice. Really look, you look for professional advice. And I think nowadays there is a lot of sensitivity and there are so many professionals, and even, you really can find a reliable medical doctor, nutritionist that understand your needs. That's very important.
Thank you very much. I did go to a doctor about this, and I encountered the same thing where many doctors are quite old-fashioned, and they've never even, well, they've
Yeah.
heard of it, but they're not that well informed, so they can't really educate you about it. But I guess I just need to do more research on which doctors to turn to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Guidre, maybe I can move to my question to Darius, if it's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, wonderful. So before everything, many thanks for this super comprehensive webinar. Really, really, really insightful. And also congratulations for, creating InSoil at the beginning of COVID. That's massive congratulations. And I was now when during the webinar, I was doing a little bit of exploration on the website, and really it's amazing everything that you and your colleagues have achieved in 5 years' time. And I have two questions indeed. The first one is more connected to public partnerships, because you're a business, definitely there are like business components on what you do, but the extent to which you have like maybe some sort of a connection with policymakers, with more public bodies, so you can also raise awareness on key topics that have a public public connection. And second question, we are in a youth goal webinar. Some of us are youth workers. We have also some youngsters. The extent to which, all these good practices, all these conversations you have with farmers, with many different stakeholders, do you know you can also, maybe include youngsters in InSoil, maybe through internships? What are the plans that maybe you have in mind? So more young people can move into this industry, and at the same time, you are also raising another level of awareness. And again, many thanks, Darius. Really, it was super, super insightful and informative.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, on private-public partnership side, I'm actually very surprised that, at least in our country, we did not manage to create meaningful partnerships with the Ministry of Agriculture. Ministry of Finance got very excited about us, and they were like, oh, that's green finance, that's awesome. And we were like, okay, and it's fine, we're working with them, we're very happy to work with them, but we were kind of hoping that agricultural sector will be much more in touch with us than they are on the policy side. So that was a little bit surprising. On the European level, actually, European Commission has quite a lot of initiatives around it. Our company been fortunate that European Commissioner who was actually leading the voluntary carbon market on the European side is Lithuanian. So that helped big time. And with him, we verified a little bit if our model is actually the right one. because when we got engaged with it, we had limited knowledge of how this maturing market will look like in some years. So all these guidances were very, very useful. Also, actually, I met in Romania quite a lot of NGOs from across Europe who also engage in voluntary carbon market. In Romania, there is, I don't remember the name of the NGO, but it was founded by one retired businessman who just purchased a lot of land, and he decided that he will make a heaven for the nature in there. And they are running as a non-governmental organization. To prove that their model is working, they have quite a bit of cameras where they saw that some rare animals got back to the forest where they seemed like they distinct for quite some time. So there are a lot of interesting initiatives around non-governmental sector. If anybody is interested in internship at InSoil, or if I could recommend you something, I'm always open to that. I was very impressed by one German NGO who decided to certify all the actions that are happening in Germany and select which ones have the highest impact. And they aren't running as an NGO. They're putting special stickers on the products that have the lowest negative impact on the environment. And I think it's amazing. So, and NGO sector in general can do quite a lot. And I think that there's a lot of potential in cooperation between companies like mine and pretty much any NGO.
Thank you very much, Darius. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Alina raised her hand, so welcome too.
Yes, hello. I just want to also for you to hear my voice. I wrote a lot in the chat. The idea is that NGOs and small and medium enterprises are, at least my opinion is that they are the structure of our union and the life that pulsates and gives all those good examples to others. And it's a good momentum of dialogue in between academia, businesses like yours or others, and us that represent real behavior of citizens. And this is where we have to overlap our expertise and knowledge, because if you're going, as I was saying, in rural Romania to see how traditional practices are carbon neutral and valuable for our planet, but they are undervalued actually, because nobody knows that they are doing things they are doing the way they are doing. It's a pity, and this is where I would like to discuss more, because it's a two-way discussion in between markets, and I know them well. I've been I was the tenure I had a tenured position in finance department and investment. And what happens in real life at the soil level, as you were telling us. So I really we really have to be in touch and see if or where or how we can connect our ideas and experience, life experience and professional one as well.
Awesome, thank you. Actually, you reminded me an interesting conversation where, like a year ago, we launched an ad that basically just stated we believe in Lithuanian farmers, in Bulgarian farmers, in Portuguese farmers, and it triggered them a lot because actually what you also mentioned, that many of them are not appreciated, and especially those people who live in the cities, what they hear about agriculture is that it's a heavily subsidized sector, but what we understood that it's not. And those subsidies that we are paying to agriculture, this is the price to avoid even a theoretical possibility of going to starvation. So growing food in Europe is definitely not the cheapest way possible. But this is the way how we secure ourselves as Europeans that we will never ever go into starvation. So even though it's cheaper to import food from Latin America, from Southeast Asia, from African countries, we're doing that not because we're seeking to be cost efficient. We're doing that to have constant access to food and to manage our food the way we like and to support our own traditions. And farmers are the ones who are actually leading the way on how we support our core values in food and traditions. So if you meet a farmer, I would so much recommend to talk to them about it. It's very interesting to learn their perspective. Also, Rosalia asked a good question: where did I gather the information and the data and the facts, especially of the first part of the presentation? So one fact about me: I'm a former journalist, so I keep my data reliable. I'll share my presentation with sources so you can follow my train of thoughts by what I read and what I found as the most useful information.
Okay, thank you so much, Darius, for everything. Is there anyone who also has like the last question? If not, I have one. What would be one of your advice for a young person who wants to start acting in sustainability field?
I would say that choose a company that has at least something sustainable in their agenda. You always have a choice where to work. And if you will put the preference to those that are doing something good to the environment, I think that that will be a very big contribution of yours. You will become professional in your field while contributing to the environment. And work takes at least 8 hours a day, and you can be doing something very good during it.
Okay, thank you so much once again for everybody who was a guest here and who participated in this webinar. I'm leaving the evaluation form. Don't forget it, fill it in. And for Darius, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your perspective. And yeah, we're very, very thankful that you were a part of our webinar and overall of a part of leading the change in sustainability and of course in sustainable Europe. So thank you so much. And for everybody who participated, I hope it was valuable for you, and I'm hoping to see you in our next webinars.
Thanks a lot. It was lovely to have a chat with you.